She left the house like any other day, but never came back. No message, no signal, no goodbye. What would you do if the person you love most disappeared in the middle of an ordinary routine? And you only discovered the truth 16 years later, with details that would make any movie seem light. This is not a fictional story. It is a real, cruel, and surprising case that shocked all of Canada. And now you will learn behind the scenes of a disappearance that hides a web of abuse, lies, and a tragic ending. If you're not yet part of our community, sign up now and turn on the notification bell. We have a lot of investigative content coming up. Adrienne Mary McClain was born in 1980 in Canada into an ordinary family that, like many others, would face its ups and downs. Daughter of Thelma Trudeau and Blair McClain, she grew up with her brother Jason, spending her childhood playing, discovering, and enjoying the bonds of a family that, even after her parents' divorce, tried to maintain harmony. After the separation, her mother began a new relationship with John McGee, the owner of a restaurant and bar in Calgary, and it was at this stage in her life that Adrienne began to shape her dreams more clearly. Her greatest desire was to work in fashion, not out of vanity, but out of genuine passion. She was the kind of person who left a mark wherever she went. She wore jeans, a loose sweatshirt, Birkenstock-style sandals, and almost always had her hair down and a hair tie on her wrist. A simple detail, but one that would be remembered, with affection and longing by everyone who knew her. Her best friend was Shannon. Together, they were inseparable. They met when they were teenagers, and ever since, they formed a duo that everyone saw as inseparable. They laughed, cried, and dreamed together. They were like Disney's Timon and Pumbaa. Adrienne, the taller, more outgoing and full of ideas. Shannon, the shorter, calmer, and more observant. Over time, the two went through the transformations of adolescence, graduated, planned their futures, and made promises. Everything seemed to be going according to plan, until, in 2000, Adrienne met Stéphane Parent. Stéphane was older, almost 12 years older than her. He had a past as an American football player in Europe, a charismatic appearance, a good conversationalist, and a taste for expensive things. He had the kind of charm that impresses at first glance, but that, over time, reveals other layers. The two met at the restaurant owned by John McGee, Adrienne's stepfather. He had made it clear that he would not allow romantic involvement between employees. But Stéphane broke that rule and, ironically, got involved with his boss's stepdaughter. At first, everything seemed perfect. Adrienne's biological father, Blair, even said that she seemed to have found someone mature, protective, and who treated her with affection. But he also noticed something that many overlooked: Stéphane's fascination with luxury and ostentation. Expensive clothes, shiny watches, fine wines, extravagant dinners, all to maintain an image that, on the inside, was unstable. The relationship progressed quickly. Soon, they were living together. In 2001, Adrienne discovered she was pregnant. It was a moment of joy, hope, and renewal. Everyone celebrated the news. Shannon was particularly emotional, but not everything was going to be rosy. At the end of her pregnancy, just 2 weeks before giving birth, Adrienne suffered a miscarriage. She had to go through the trauma of giving birth to a baby who was no longer alive. It was one of the most devastating moments of her life. She was emotionally shattered. But what hurt her the most was realizing that there was no support by her side. Stéphane offered to help her for a week. 1 week. After that, he said he couldn't stand to see her cry, and he simply left, claiming he needed a vacation in Montreal. While she cried alone, he traveled. While she buried a child, he disappeared. When he returned, he found Adrienne living with her stepfather John and their dog Max. John made it clear Stéphane would no longer be welcome in that house, but Adrienne, despite everything, came back to him, over and over again, even after being left alone, even after suffering, even when friends and family begged her to break the cycle. The relationship became increasingly unhealthy. Fights, financial crises, pawned jewelry. Adrienne had to sell things she loved to pay off debts, and yet Stéphane kept buying. He kept demanding. Shannon, always close by, noticed how her friend was slowly sinking, but unable to get out. Blair, her father, began to hear stories from Adrienne that made him tremble. As a seasoned police officer, he knew how to recognize danger. She said that Stefan was aggressive, that the situation was getting worse. He tried to intervene, to warn her, to explain that violent men are unpredictable. But Adrienne wouldn't listen. She defended Stefan. She said it was just a phase, that he was good, that I loved him. Friends of the couple witnessed terrifying scenes with their own eyes. In one of them, Stefan strangled Adrienne. When they tried to talk to her, she pushed them away. She said everything was fine, that they didn't understand. The toxic relationship began to affect their work. They were both fired. Adrienne's life seemed to revolve around Stefan and the chaos he brought with him. In early 2002, something finally seemed to change. Adrienne gathered her courage. She decided that she needed to start over, that she deserved more, that her dreams were still alive. At just 21, she decided to resume her plan to study fashion design. She applied to a college in Vancouver and was accepted. Her mother welcomed her with open arms. John, her stepfather, promised to help her with the costs of her new life. It was a real chance at freedom. Adrienne was determined to break up with Stefan. She called his sister Julie and told her everything. She said she was getting a new job as a waitress to save money and that she would be leaving Calgary soon. That was the last time anyone in the parent family had contact with her. On Monday, February 11th, Adrienne stopped by Shannon's work. She asked to borrow some money. She wanted to get back the items she had pawned. It was unusual. She always took care of everything on her own. Shannon thought it was strange, but gave her the money, not realizing that it would be the last time they saw each other. On the 13th, Adrienne spoke to her friend on the phone. She said she was going to the dentist. She seemed fine. There was no indication of the horror that was about to happen. On the morning of the 12th, she gave her stepfather a ride to the restaurant. They had coffee together. They laughed. They talked about their future plans. She said she was going home to get ready for work. John was going to play golf and would be back on Sunday the 17th. Over the next few days, he tried calling her several times. The calls went straight to voicemail. He began to worry. Only later would he find out that on the 13th, Adrienne called her new job at 11:30 a.m., half an hour after her shift had started, to say she couldn't make it because she had to testify in a trial involving Stefan. Her ex-boyfriend was facing charges of theft, fraud, threats, and obstructing police. Adrienne had posted $8,000 bail for him, money forfeited when he violated the conditions. Police officers at the courthouse that day saw the two arguing outside. She was never seen again after that. On Sunday, John returns from his trip. Adrienne's car is in the garage, but her black Mercury is missing. Inside the house, everything seems normal, until he finds Max, the dog, downstairs, weak, not eating, dehydrated. The dog had vision problems and could never come downstairs on his own. This indicated that Adrienne had been missing for days. Desperate, John starts calling everyone. No news. Thelma, her mother, confirms that she was not in Vancouver. Shannon is also without information, but she feels something bad. On the 18th, she watches the news and sees the call. A body had been found in a ditch in the rural area of Nanton, more than 90 kilometers from Calgary. She knows in the depths of her heart, it is Adrienne. The body had been found by a farmer who was herding cattle with his children. From a distance, he saw what looked like a blanket. As he got closer, he saw that it was a human body. He quickly called for help. The police arrived. The body was wrapped in plastic bags and covered by a sheet. She was dressed, but barefoot. There was a visible tattoo on her back. It was Adrienne. Forensic investigator Robert Dunn identified fractures to her head, but the cause of death was even more gruesome: strangulation. There were no signs of sexual abuse or struggle. She was probably already unconscious when she was killed. The bags she was wrapped in matched those from the restaurant where she worked. The bedsheet also appeared to be from the house where she lived. But one key piece was missing: irrefutable evidence. Without documents, authorities asked the public for help. Shannon saw the news report. She immediately called the police. The identification was made. It was official. Adrienne was dead. The news came as a bombshell. Shannon, Thelma, Blair. Everyone was plunged into a deep and paralyzing mourning. Adrienne's father, a seasoned police officer accustomed to dealing with tragedies, confessed that he never imagined he would feel such pain. The loss of a daughter is something that cannot be explained. It is like waking up from a nightmare only to discover that it is real. The funeral was devastating. Friends and family tried in vain to find some comfort, but nothing calmed them. Anger and helplessness grew. The suspect was clear: Stefan. But he had disappeared. While John was away, someone had stolen $8,400 from the restaurant. The police began investigating whether the theft was related to the case, and everything pointed to Stefan. John's car was found abandoned in the airport parking lot. Inside were Adrienne's sandals. Underneath the vehicle, a pair of jeans were found. A parking ticket marked the date and time: February 15th, 4:58 a.m. Airport officials remembered Stefan. He was nervous, insistent, had paid more than $600 cash for a ticket to Ottawa, and was carrying an unusual amount of money. He was on the run. Again, John's house was searched. The cleaning lady, who had cleaned on the 15th, noticed something strange. A sheet was missing from Adrienne's bed. It was exactly the same pattern as the one found covering the body. She had also washed the sheets, thus destroying a possible crime scene. Samples were collected: garbage bags, bottles, strands of hair. But in 2002, forensic technology was still limited. The investigation stalled, and eventually, it went cold. But the family didn't give up. Blair, Shannon, and John did what many others can't. They kept the case alive. They went on shows, gave interviews, and lobbied the authorities. They never let Adrienne be forgotten. But time was cruel. Years passed. No arrests. No answers. No peace. Meanwhile, Stefan called his sister. He called the police. He cried on the phone. He screamed. He despaired. But he never gave himself up. He never told them where he was. He never cooperated. He played cat and mouse with everyone, as if he were untouchable. In 2013, new hope arose. Inspector Chad Kurlock took over the case, and he decided to start from scratch. He investigated all the suspects again, re-examined all the leads, but the evidence kept pointing to the same man, Stefan Parent. Then, with advances in technology, a new possibility emerged. Old, previously worthless samples could now be analyzed using modern techniques. The plastic bags that had wrapped the body were examined using a technology called vacuum metal deposition, capable of identifying fingerprints that were invisible to the naked eye. The jeans found under the car were also tested. They contained Adrienne's blood and male DNA on the pockets. They were his. There was no denying it anymore. This was the missing piece of evidence. The circle was closing in. With the new evidence in hand, the police pieced together everything that had been ignored, forgotten, or underestimated over more than a decade. The details began to form a terrifying and perfectly coherent puzzle. The fingerprints on the plastic bags, the sheets that had mysteriously disappeared from the bed, the pants with blood and DNA on them, the parking ticket at the airport, the sudden escape, the purchase of the ticket in cash, the lack of an alibi, the contradictions in the testimonies. Stefan's sister Julie was called to testify again. This time she revealed some disturbing things. She described phone calls Stefan had made shortly after the murder. He spoke coldly. He didn't seem shaken. He said vague things like, "What happened to her was awful." But he showed no remorse. He told two completely different versions of what happened on the day he left. In one, he said Adrienne drove him to the airport. In the other, he said, she was fast asleep and he went alone. But in both versions, he revealed details that had not been released to the press. Information that only someone involved in the crime would know. This was crucial. In 2018, 16 years after Adrienne's death, Stefan Parent was finally arrested in Quebec. He was charged with second-degree murder. The trial began in 2021. The prosecution described the story of an abusive relationship marked by manipulation, violence, and fear. Adrienne had tried to leave. She had made plans. She had said, "Enough." And that was when he decided to kill her. The prosecution insisted. There was no invasion. There was no visible altercation. There was no struggle. She knew him. She trusted him. She allowed him to enter. And she was surprised. The tests showed that Adrienne had been struck several times in the head before being manually strangled. The force of the blows had fractured her skull over a length of 10 centimeters. There were no signs of resistance. She was probably already unconscious when she was murdered. There were no drugs or alcohol in her blood. There was no doubt. This was an intimate, personal, brutal crime. The defense tried to argue. They hired a pathologist who said that, given the lividity of her body, Adrienne could have died on the 17th, when Stefan would already be out of town. But the timeline didn't add up. The clothes, the objects, the GPS data, the malnourished dog. Everything indicated that she had died days earlier, on Valentine's Day, when she was still home alone, after taking John to the restaurant. Defense: witnesses tried to divert attention. One woman said she saw a blonde being chased by a truck, but the description of her clothing didn't match. Others said they didn't see anything strange on the road where the body was found, but they couldn't see the exact location of the ditch, because it was deep and far from the main road. No amount of argument could dispel what the evidence was saying. On October 1st, 2021, after just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found Stefan, parent guilty, second-degree murder, life sentence, with the possibility of parole only after 17 years. For Shannon, it was like breathing after years of suffocation. A bitter relief, because justice had been served, but the pain did not go away. Blair, Adrienne's father, had publicly stated that he hoped Stefan would never leave prison. But his words carried another, even deeper pain, the loss of Jason, Adrienne's brother. Jason could not bear the grief of his sister. He sank into alcoholism, and he died in 2020, before the trial even took place. Blair felt that she had lost both of her children, victims of the same abuser. Even after his conviction, Stefan continued to claim his innocence. He tried to appeal, claiming that one of the jurors knew Adrienne's stepfather's restaurant. The appeal was unanimously denied. There was no room for doubt. The police stressed that it was only possible to reach justice thanks to the family's persistence, the advancement of forensic science, and the courage of people like Shannon and Julie, who never let Adrienne's story be forgotten. And even though justice has finally been served, the pain, the absence, the emptiness, these still remain. If you've made it this far, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like it, and share in the comments what other cases you'd like to see covered. Your participation is essential for us to continue bringing you these important stories. Until the next case.